Hello, sixth grade students. Here we are with Granted. And I think we're about to find out how a fairy enters the human world and grants a wish. And we found out that she is to grant the wish to a girl who wants a purple bicycle because hers was stolen. So I'm going to start in the middle of page 54. Floors 140 to 145 were the exception. Those floors were home to the Modders, a name they had given themselves. The most eclectic wrangle of fairy folk you could hope to find in the Haven. A mixture of talented builders and makers and alchemists, they were responsible for the creation, maintenance, and repair of the gadgets and gear that every grantor took with her into the field. Everything from wish intensification goggles to underwater survival suits to wolf repellent, because wolves, unlike bears, were not above having a fairy for breakfast if they could catch one. They were geniuses, the Modders, not the wolves, though you wouldn't know it by walking past their office, seeing them compete for who could sit on a spinning acorn top the longest without throwing up, or who could stuff the most blueberries into their mouth. 6, which is impressive given the size of a fairy's cheeks. Still, when they stopped flitting around and put their minds to their work, the results were just short of magical. Some of it, in fact, was magical, if only a touch. Most of the tech was borrowed from humans, of course, running on stolen watch batteries or tiny solar power arrays adapted for fey purposes. A great deal of it shrunk down, miniaturized to easily fit into fairy hands and clip onto fairy belts. The homing devices that each grantor carried into the field, for example, were mostly electronic in nature, built from discarded cell phone parts, tinkered together with whatever scraps the salvagers brought back from their weekly forays into the outer world, and then given a bit of flair to make them fey-friendly. The Modders were experts at melding the natural and artificial, taking the human addiction to plastic, silicon, and steel and merging it with the fairies' love of wood and woven hemp. The results were often impractical or sometimes dangerous, but they were always unique, and some of it was essential to any fairy heading out beyond the border. They were still just contraptions, though. Even with their growing technical know-how, the Modders knew there was no beating fairy dust when it came to getting things done. One pinch of the good stuff could get an agent out of a bad scrape better than 300 electro-confabulated doohickeys. Unfortunately, the Modders were allocated only a scant amount of dust to use, just enough to give the grantors who went beyond the Haven's borders the necessary tools to do their jobs, to keep the system running, to keep the Haven safe. Arnold Amaryllis Rowley met Ophelia by the door wearing a pair of sunglasses that he'd obviously constructed himself. A fashion statement, he called them, but Ophelia guessed he wore them to keep his left eye from being too much of a distraction. It never stopped moving, like water circling a drain. Today, he also wore patched-together denim shorts and corkboard sandals. The writing on the homespun t-shirt warned, "Don't tinker with my bells." Ophelia had no idea what it meant, but she guessed Arnold's friends probably found it hilarious. "Ophelia fidgets," he said, welcoming her inside the workshop where he and his fellow geniuses spent most of their waking hours, and even some of their non-waking ones. "I figured I'd see you down here soon. Squint sent us the assignment sheet. You're number 12 on the list. This is your first time, right?" Ophelia's smile faded. Arnold offered much the same look Charlie had given her moments before, equal parts doubt and concern. Why was everyone looking at her that way? It's not as if she hadn't been training for this moment for most of her life. No one looked worried when Rebecca came down to the office complaining about her assignment, unless they were worried that she'd never stop talking about it. "The first of many," Ophelia said. She realized she was messing with one of the polished brass buttons of her shirt and tucked her hands under her arm. Hard to exude confidence when your fingers are fiddling with your uniform. Sure. Just, first time can be a little nerve-wracking. Am I right? It's the alligators, Charlie muttered from behind her. Ophelia turned and scowled before remembering she was the one who asked him to come along. Alligators? Pish posh, we've got them covered, Arnold said with a wave. Don't worry your pretty blue head over it. We'll get you prepped and ready to fly in no time. Have you given any thought to your loadout? Ophelia nodded. How many nights had she spent lying in her hammock, looking up at the stars, imagining what she would bring with her if she ever got an assignment? She had a list for every environment, every conceivable situation, whether she was granting the wish of an Eskimo in the snowbound Arctic tundra or that of a man dying of thirst in the parched wasteland of Death Valley. Kettering, Ohio was neither of those, of course. It probably wasn't too different from Gatlinburg, the city in which they did most of their training, on account, Charlie said, of it being full of oddities already. So who's going to notice a fairy? That didn't mean she couldn't be prepared. It was spring, the first season, but the air still held a considerable chill, and she was traveling north where it could be even colder. I'll need a flight suit, she said, thermal, with decent-sized pockets. She'd also need a locator, of course, and a med kit, some lip balm to prevent chapping, and some granola or peanuts, just in case she got hungry during flight. Some twine, always handy, and a roll of the stuff the modders called super silver sticky strips, a miraculous substance they pilfered directly from the humans and cut down to fairy size. Probably some goggles to keep the bugs out of her eyes in flight. Charlie would let her borrow his, of course, but she doubted they would fit, and they were already filmed with grime. Oh, and an extra pair of socks. There was a chance for rain mid-flight, and there was nothing Ophelia hated more than the sickening squish of walking around in soaked socks. She rattled off her list to Arnold, who nodded after every item. Aha, extra socks, gotcha. And what about self-defense? Self-defense, Ophelia repeated. Well, I plan on taking a knife, and I'll have a camo, of course. The use of camouflage was standard operating procedure for all fairies leaving the safety of the haven and was the only magical protection the guild provided. It played tricks on the eyes and boggled the brain. A human could look dead on a fairy using camo and think she was seeing a dragonfly or a small bird, something natural and beautiful, but certainly not enchanted. It was how fairies had stayed virtually undetected for the past 100 years in a world where there were more and more people and fewer places to hide. Humans feared what they didn't understand. Ophelia knew everything had to be studied, picked apart, dissected, and classified and explained. At least that's how Squint put it when he delivered his little speeches about the importance of being secretive and stealthy. Get caught and the whole fairy world might come crashing down. So no matter how much the supply of fairy dust dwindled, Squint still insisted on camouflaging his agents. Arnold nodded. Well, sure, camo will help with the humans, but it's not going to do a thing if you get caught by an owl or attacked by a cheetah. They'll eat you no matter what you look like. It's just in their nature. I don't think there are many cheetahs in Ohio, Ophelia said, although she was starting to doubt her knowledge of Midwestern ecology. I'm only saying that a human looks at you with your camo on and sees a butterfly or hummingbird. But there are some creatures that are going to look at you and just see food. They don't care what shape it takes. Told you, Charlie seconded. Charlie and Arnold exchanged looks. Ophelia groaned. Fine. Give me some cheetah repellent then. Yeah, we don't carry that, Arnold told her with a scratch of his scruffy chin. But we do have this. Arnold fluttered to one of a dozen shelves along the wall and came back with a little metal cylinder, like one of those things used to store their lip paint, except it had a hole near the top and a little wooden button. He handed it over and Ophelia immediately started shaking it. Whoa, what are you doing? Arnold shouted, snatching a snatching it back and suddenly speaking a whole new language. Are you serious? That's fully weaponized fairy dust extract, chemically restructured in aerosol form and contained in a high-pressure dispersal unit capable of firing an accurate blast of somnolence-inducing compound at a full 20 feet. Ophelia cocked an eyebrow. Did you catch any of that? She asked Charlie. I got feet, he said. Okay, basically it's knockout gas, Arnold explained. One shot of this stuff and it's sweet dreams for anything under 150 pounds. More than that might take a couple of hits, but it will still do the job. A real noggin boggler. Ophelia studied the canister, careful not to shake it this time. You mean it puts him to sleep? Does it hurt? She realized it was a stupid question as soon as she said it. When had fairy dust ever hurt anyone? Then again, she'd never heard of it being weaponized before. Arnold shook his head. No, renders them unconscious is all. I mean, I guess if you sprayed somebody while they were standing on the edge of a cliff, it could be dangerous. I'll set you up with 2 cans. Just, don't use it unless you have to. Consider it a weapon of last resort. We only get a pinch of dust for R and D purposes anymore, and I hate to waste it. Ophelia considered telling him not to bother, to save it for a fairy who might need it. Then she remembered the inscription above Squint's office door. Anticipate everything. Maybe a little sleepy spray wouldn't hurt. Of course, if it is a cheetah, it will probably pounce on you and gobble you up before you even get your finger on the button, Arnold mused. Now let's get you fitted for that flight suit. Got a color in mind? Ophelia was distracted, picturing herself getting mauled by a wild animal in the middle of Kettering, Ohio. What? Oh yes, color. She was hardly ever out of uniform. The nut brown tunic and pressed pants with the blood red stripe running along the leg. But nearly everything else she owned that wasn't the brown and scarlet of the Granter scale was blue, to match her hair and eyes. Blue sweaters and coats and dresses, blue shoes and socks, even a jewelry. What little of it she owned was set with sapphires. The color reminded her of the day she was found. Except Ophelia's founding day was over 4 years ago. Now, today was a different kind of first. It called for a change, something remarkable to mark the occasion. Ophelia looked at Charlie and he smiled back, his hair still flaring out in every direction. Maybe pink, she said. Pink? Arnold questioned. Not exactly subtle. The birds especially are going to notice you. Even with the camo on, you'll look like a fat flying worm. You sure do know how to compliment a girl, Ophelia told him. I'm just saying, birds are nasty creatures, a whole lot of them. Back me up here, Whitaker. It's true. A bird ate my grandmother, Charlie said. It was a joke, of course. Fairies didn't have grandmothers. Our mothers, our fathers, or brothers, or sisters, or cousins. They had founders who helped to bring them into the world, and after that, they had each other. Ophelia shook her head. She wasn't worried. If a bird wants to eat me, it's going to have to catch me first, she said. And good luck with that. Wow, so she's off. She's going to be off soon in her pink suit. We're going to start on page 11 tomorrow. Thank you for reading chapter 10 with me this evening. We'll start on page 11. Hope you have a really good evening and see you tomorrow, 6th grade students.